The cantina on Zephyr Station reeked of sulfur and cheap synthetic alcohol. Maya Chen kept her hood pulled low as she wiped down tables, her enhanced reflexes automatically cataloging every patron's movements. 3 Valkyrie traders argued over shipping routes near the bar. A lone Astery pilot nursed his drink in the corner, his scaled hands trembling slightly from stim withdrawal. 2 security guards flanked the entrance, their weapons poorly maintained but functional enough to cause trouble. Maya had been working this job for 8 months now, invisible among the galaxy's outcasts and wanderers. To everyone around her, she was just another human refugee from the war-torn Sol system, grateful for any work that kept her fed. They had no idea that the small woman cleaning their tables had once commanded entire fleets, that her tactical decisions had saved billions of lives, or that 3 different alien empires had put bounties on her head that could buy small planets. The war had ended 2 years ago, but Maya's war would never end. Not as long as she drew breath. A new customer entered, and Maya's blood turned to ice. The figure was tall and elegant, with the characteristic pale blue skin and silver hair of a Zephyrian noble. Ambassador Kethral Voss stepped into the cantina like he owned it, his cold eyes scanning the room with predatory precision. Maya forced herself to continue wiping the same table, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to run or fight. Kethral had been there at the Battle of Proxima Station. He had watched from his command ship as Maya's forces turned what should have been humanity's final defeat into their greatest victory. She had used the Zephyrians' own superiority complex against them, making them believe they were pursuing scattered human survivors while she maneuvered her fleet into a devastating pincer formation. When the trap closed, it had cost the Zephyrians 60% of their war fleet. The ambassador's gaze passed over her without recognition. Maya was just another human servant beneath his notice. She had worked hard to become forgettable, dyeing her distinctive red hair brown, wearing cheap contact lenses to hide her unusual green eyes, and adopting the stooped posture of someone beaten down by circumstance. The scars from her cybernetic implants were hidden beneath carefully applied makeup. "I require a private booth," Kethral announced to the bartender, his translator rendering his words in crisp galactic standard. "And bring me your finest Terran whiskey." Maya almost smiled at that. Even the Zephyrians who had tried to exterminate humanity couldn't resist human alcohol. It was one of the few things that affected their enhanced metabolism, and they paid ridiculous prices for it on the black market. She had seen alien warlords negotiate treaties over bottles of bourbon that cost more than most beings made in a year. As she continued her cleaning rounds, Maya listened to the conversations around her. The Valkyrie traders were discussing a new shipping route through the Outer Rim, complaining about increased pirate activity. The Astery pilot was mumbling about strange readings in the neutral zone, something about uncharted gravitational anomalies. But it was the conversation at Kethral's booth that made her blood run cold. "The human is definitely on this station," a second Zephyrian said, sliding into the booth across from the ambassador. This one wore the dark uniform of Zephyrian intelligence, his augmented eyes glowing softly in the cantina's dim lighting. "Our sources confirmed she was seen in the market district yesterday. After 2 years of searching, we finally have her cornered," Kethral replied, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Admiral Maya Chun, the ghost of Proxima, the woman who humiliated our entire fleet. Soon she will pay for her crimes against the Zephyrian Empire." Maya's hand tightened on her cleaning cloth. They were close, closer than they had ever been. But how had they found her? She had been so careful, covering her tracks, changing her appearance, never staying in one place too long. Someone had betrayed her, but who? "The bounty hunters we hired are already in position," the intelligence officer continued. "The human thinks she's safe here, protected by the station's neutrality laws. She has no idea that money can buy anything, even the cooperation of supposedly neutral security forces." Maya forced herself to keep moving, to maintain her role as an insignificant servant. But her mind was racing, calculating odds, planning escape routes, falling back into the tactical thinking that had made her legendary. The cantina had 3 exits: main entrance, service corridor, and emergency airlock. Security cameras covered all of them, but she knew their blind spots. Her ship was docked in Bay 94, but they would be watching it. She needed a distraction, something to draw their attention while she slipped away. The Astery pilot suddenly stood up, swaying on his feet. "Station's haunted," he slurred loudly, drawing annoyed looks from the other patrons. "Seen things moving in the maintenance tunnels. Ships going missing. Something's not right here." Most of the cantina's patrons ignored his ramblings, but Maya paid attention. She had noticed things, too, during her time on the station. Maintenance workers disappearing. Strange energy readings. Ships arriving but never appearing on the departure logs. Zephyr Station was hiding secrets of its own. Kethril stood abruptly, his conversation apparently finished. "Begin the operation at midnight," he told his companion. "I want her taken alive if possible. The Empire has questions that need answering before she dies." As the Zephyrians left the cantina, Maya made her decision. She couldn't run again, not this time. She was tired of hiding, tired of pretending to be weak when strength was all she had ever known. If they wanted Admiral Maya Chun, then they would get her. But not the broken refugee they expected. They would face the woman who had turned the tide of an interstellar war with nothing but human cunning and an unbreakable will to survive. Maya finished cleaning the last table and hung up her apron. Her supervisor barely looked up as she claimed she was feeling sick and needed to leave early. In her small quarters, she opened a hidden panel and retrieved items she hadn't touched in months. Her military uniform modified with advanced armor plating, weapons that would make a Zephyrian warship nervous. And most importantly, the portable quantum communicator that could reach anywhere in the galaxy. She had one advantage. Her enemies didn't know about. Maya Chun had never been just a soldier. She had been humanity's greatest tactician because she understood something that most species couldn't grasp. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to survive. And there was nothing more dangerous in the universe than a human who had nothing left to lose. Maya's fingers moved across the quantum communicator's controls with practiced precision. The device hummed to life, its quantum entanglement matrices establishing an impossible connection across thousands of light years in mere seconds. She had built this communicator herself during the war, using technology that the galaxy's greatest minds insisted was theoretically impossible. Human engineers had a habit of making the impossible work anyway. "Phoenix protocol activated," she whispered into the device. "This is Ghost Actual. Package is compromised. Requesting immediate extraction support." The response came within moments, crackling through space-time with the familiar voice of Marcus Rodriguez, her former intelligence chief. "Maya, thank God you're alive. We've been monitoring Zephyrian communications. Half the galaxy's bounty hunters are converging on your position." "I know. Kethril's here personally. They want me alive for interrogation." Maya began strapping on her armor, the familiar weight settling across her shoulders like an old friend returning home. "What's the situation with the underground?" "Growing stronger every day. Turns out declaring victory over humanity was premature. We've got cells on 47 worlds now. And 3 full fleets operating in the Outer Rim. The Valkyrie Confederation has started providing us with supplies, and the Astery Collective is considering an open alliance." Maya smiled grimly as she checked her weapons. After the official end of the war, most governments had assumed humanity would simply fade away, scattered across the galaxy as refugees and laborers. They had underestimated human stubbornness. Instead of disappearing, humans had gone underground, building networks, gathering intelligence, and slowly rebuilding their strength. "I need you to do something for me, Marcus. There's something strange happening on this station. Ships disappearing, energy readings that don't make sense. I think someone's running an illegal research operation. We'll look into it. But Maya, you need to get out of there now. Don't try to fight your way out like old times. Just run." Maya powered down the communicator and sealed it back in its hiding place. Marcus was right about one thing. She couldn't fight the entire station. But she wasn't planning to run either. She had spent 2 years being invisible, and in that time she had learned things about the galaxy that most people never saw. The view from the bottom was very different from the view from a command bridge. She made her way through the station's maintenance tunnels, moving silently through passages that most beings couldn't even fit through. Human flexibility and smaller size had advantages that the larger alien species often overlooked. The tunnels were a maze of pipes, conduits, and access shafts. But Maya had memorized every route during her months of work. As she moved deeper into the station's infrastructure, she began to understand what the drunk As-3 pilot had been talking about. There were sections of the tunnel system that didn't appear on any official blueprints. Energy readings spiked in patterns that suggested massive power consumption. But there were no facilities listed that could account for it. Maya paused at an intersection, her enhanced hearing picking up voices echoing from ahead. She crept forward, using her military training to move without sound, until she could see into a large chamber that shouldn't have existed according to the station's official layout. What she saw made her blood run cold. The chamber was filled with containment pods, each one holding a different alien species suspended in some kind of stasis fluid. Valkyrie, As-3, Zephyrians, even a few humans floated motionless in the green-tinted liquid. Scientists in environmental suits moved between the pods, taking readings and adjusting controls, but these weren't just any scientists. Maya recognized the leader from intelligence briefings during the war, Dr. Viridian Kess, a brilliant but ruthless researcher who had disappeared during the final battles. The official story was that he had died when his research station was destroyed, but Maya was looking at proof that he had simply gone underground. Subject 77 Alpha shows promising genetic adaptation, Dr. Kess was saying to his assistant, a cybernetically enhanced Zephyrian. The human specimens continued to display remarkable resistance to the neural conditioning protocols. Should we increase the dosage? The assistant asked. No, the beauty of human genetics is their adaptability. Push too hard and we risk losing the very qualities that make them useful. We need willing subjects, not broken shells. Maya felt sick as she realized what she was witnessing. This was why ships had been disappearing from the station. People weren't leaving. They were being captured and used as test subjects in some kind of horrific experiment. The station's neutrality was a perfect cover, allowing Dr. Kess to operate without interference from any government. She activated a small recording device built into her armor, capturing everything she could see and hear. This information would be invaluable to the human underground, proof that their enemies were even more monstrous than anyone had realized. The Zephyrian Empire has approved expansion of the project, Dr. Kess continued. They want us to perfect the process before moving to larger population centers. Imagine it, entire worlds of genetically modified beings perfectly loyal to the Empire's will. What about the admiral they're hunting? The assistant asked. Mao Shun could pose a significant threat if she discovers our operation. Dr. Kess laughed coldly. One human, no matter how skilled, cannot threaten what we're building here. Besides, I'm curious to study her unique neural patterns. The woman who defeated 3 fleets simultaneously must have extraordinary cognitive capabilities. She would make an excellent test subject. Maya had heard enough. She began to back away, planning to retreat and find another route to the docking bays, when her foot caught on a loose pipe. The metallic clang echoed through the chamber, causing every head to turn in her direction. Intruder in Section C7. The assistant shouted, reaching for an alarm control. Maya didn't hesitate. She sprinted through the tunnels, no longer caring about stealth. Behind her, she could hear security alerts blaring and the sound of pursuit. The station's security forces would be converging on her position within minutes. She burst out of the maintenance tunnels into a busy commercial corridor, causing surprise shouts from the various aliens going about their business. Maya kept running, her enhanced physiology allowing her to move faster than most species could match. She needed to reach the communications center and transmit what she had learned to the human. Underground, a squad of security guards rounded the corner ahead of her, weapons drawn. Maya dove behind a market stall selling exotic fruits, the vendor squawking in protest as energy bolts seared the air above her head. She drew her sidearm and returned fire, her shots precisely placed to disable rather than kill. Despite everything that had been done to humanity, she still held to the principles that had made her a respected military leader. "This is security to all units," a voice crackled over the station's intercom system. "Wanted human terrorist is in Section D4. Use of lethal force is authorized." Maya smiled grimly. They were calling her a terrorist now. During the war, they had called her a criminal, a pirate, a monster. The labels changed, but the fear in their voices remained the same. She was proof that humanity refused to die quietly, and that terrified them more than any weapon ever could. She had to move fast. The longer she stayed in one place, the more enemies would surround her. But she had learned something valuable during her time. Hiding among the galaxy's forgotten. Sometimes the best way to fight back wasn't with guns or starships. Sometimes it was with information shared among people who had been overlooked and underestimated. Maya activated her emergency beacon, sending a coded signal that would reach every human cell in the sector. The message was simple but devastating: the location of Dr. Kess's facility, proof of what the Zephrine Empire was really planning, and coordinates for a rescue operation that she might not escape this station alive, but her discovery would save countless lives. That was what mattered. That was what made humans dangerous and why their enemies would never truly defeat them. They understood that some things were worth dying for. The station's alarm system shrieked like a wounded animal as Maya fought her way through the commercial district. Security forces were converging from all directions. But they were making a crucial mistake. They were treating her like a cornered refugee instead of a military tactician who had spent her entire career studying alien psychology and tactics. Maya ducked into a clothing shop, startling a Valkyrie merchant who immediately began chattering about insurance and damages. She ignored him, focusing on the tactical display her armor systems had constructed from the station's publicly available blueprints. The security forces were following standard containment protocols, which meant they would establish perimeters at logical choke points and then sweep inward. But Maya had spent 8 months learning the station's hidden geography. She knew about the forgotten maintenance shafts, the unofficial shortcuts that smugglers used, and the areas where the original construction had deviated from the official plans. Most importantly, she understood something that the security forces didn't. Zephyr Station had been built by the lowest bidder using whatever materials they could acquire cheaply. She activated her armor's cutting laser and burned through what appeared to be a solid wall. Behind it was empty space where a support beam should have been, evidence of the corner cutting that made stations like this profitable but structurally unsound. Maya squeezed through the gap just as security forces burst into the shop behind her. The space between the walls was cramped and dark, filled with the hum of machinery and the smell of recycled air. Maya activated her helmet's night vision and began moving toward the station's central core. She had a plan now, but it would require precision timing and a thorough understanding of how the station's systems worked. During her time as a janitor, Maya had noticed something interesting about Zephyr Station's power distribution network. The designers had prioritized redundancy and efficiency, which meant that a single critical failure could cascade through the entire system if someone knew exactly where to apply pressure. It was a weakness that only became apparent when you understood both the engineering and the psychology of the species involved. Maya reached the central power junction after 20 minutes of crawling through. Space is barely large enough for her human frame. The junction was protected by basic security measures, but they were designed to prevent casual interference. Not a determined assault by someone with military-grade equipment, she began placing shaped charges at key structural points, each one carefully calculated to create maximum disruption with minimum risk to civilian areas. Maya had never targeted non-combatants during the war, and she wouldn't start now. But the military sections of the station, including the Security Command Center and Dr. Kess's hidden laboratory, were fair targets. As she worked, Maya's communicator crackled to life with an encrypted signal. "Ghost Actual, this is Raven Leader. We've received your transmission and are moving to assist." Maya smiled as she recognized the voice of Captain Sarah Kim, one of her former squadron leaders. Raven Leader, how did you get here so fast? We've been tracking Zephyrian fleet movements for weeks. When they started converging on this sector, we knew something important was happening. Lucky for you, we had assets positioned nearby. What's your tactical situation? 3 squadrons of captured Zephyrian fighters, modified with human upgrades. We're running silent outside the system's detection grid. Just give us a target and we'll light it up. Maya finished placing the last charge and began moving toward her secondary. Objective: the station's central computer core. Negative on the strike package. Too many civilians. I need you to create a distraction while I finish my mission. Roger that. What kind of distraction did you have in mind? Maya grinned as she emerged from the maintenance shaft into the station's command section. The kind that reminds everyone why humans are still in this fight? The command section was heavily guarded, but Maya had advantages that the security forces couldn't counter. Her armor stealth systems made her nearly invisible to most sensor types, and her enhanced reflexes allowed her to move through the corridors like a ghost. She had learned patience during her months of hiding, and now she applied that patience to warfare. She reached the computer core without raising an alarm. Her infiltration skills honed by 2 years of avoiding detection. The core was protected by advanced encryption, but Maya had come prepared. She connected a quantum decryption device of her own design, technology that pushed the boundaries of what should have been possible with available materials. While the device worked, Maya accessed the station's communication array and began broadcasting on frequencies that only the human underground would recognize. Her message was simple but devastating: detailed schematics of Dr. Kess's facility, evidence of the illegal experimentation, and proof that the Zephyrian Empire was planning to expand the program to other worlds. But Maya wasn't finished. She had spent months observing the patterns of corruption and abuse that made places like Zephyr Station possible. The security forces who took bribes, the administrators who looked the other way, the merchants who dealt in sentient beings. All of it was documented in the station's own records. Protected by encryption that assumed no one would be clever enough to break it, Maya began downloading everything: financial records, security footage, communication logs, information that would expose an entire network of criminal activity spanning dozens of systems. The human underground could use this data to strike back at their enemies in ways that conventional warfare never could. The decryption device signaled completion just as alarms began blaring throughout the command section. Maya had been discovered, but it was too late. She had what she came for. Ghost Actual, this is Raven Leader. We're detecting massive security response converging on your position. Time to go. Maya disconnected her equipment and began moving toward the nearest exit. Copy that. Beginning extraction. Execute Operation Beacon. Understood. All units execute Beacon. Let's remind these aliens why they should fear the dark. Outside the station, 3 squadrons of human fighters decloaked simultaneously, their modified Zephyrian technology giving them capabilities that no one expected from supposedly defeated refugees. But they weren't attacking the station directly. Instead, they began broadcasting human music, literature, and poetry on every frequency the station could receive. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Across the station, alien species that had convinced themselves humanity was finished suddenly heard proof that humans were still out there, still fighting, still refusing to surrender. The broadcasts included messages from human resistance cells on dozens of worlds, testimonials from survivors, and promises that no crime against humanity would be forgotten or forgiven. Maya fought her way through increasingly desperate security forces as the station's inhabitants realized they were surrounded by humans who had supposedly been wiped out years ago. Panic began to spread as aliens who had participated in the exploitation of human refugees suddenly understood that their victims had friends who remembered everything. She reached the docking bay where her ship waited, only to find Ambassador Kethril and a squad of Zephyrian soldiers blocking her path. The alien noble stood with arrogant confidence, his ornate weapon drawn and pointed directly at Maya's chest. "Admiral Maya-chan," he said with satisfaction. "Finally we meet face to face. You have caused considerable trouble for the Empire, but your rebellion ends here." Maya stopped walking but didn't lower her weapons. Around the docking bay she could see more enemies taking position. They had her outnumbered and outgunned, but they still didn't understand what they were dealing with. "Ambassador Kethril," she replied calmly. "I remember you from Proxima Station. You were the one who sent that message demanding humanity's unconditional surrender. A demand you refused to acknowledge, leading to unnecessary bloodshed on both sides." Maya laughed, the sound echoing through the docking bay with genuine amusement. "Unnecessary? You tried to commit genocide and you're calling our resistance unnecessary? Your species was too dangerous to be allowed to continue unchanged. The galaxy requires order and humans represent chaos." "You're right about one thing," Maya said, raising her weapon. "We do represent chaos, but you forgot something important about chaos." "And what is that?" Maya's smile was cold as starlight. "It's impossible to predict." Maya's finger hovered over the detonator as she stared down Ambassador Kethril. The shaped charges she had placed throughout the station would create chaos, but they wouldn't kill civilians if she timed everything correctly. She had learned from studying alien psychology that different species reacted to crisis in predictable ways. The Zephyrians would focus on protecting their command structure. The Valkyrie would prioritize their trade goods. The Asari would seek shelter and wait for the danger to pass. "You're bluffing," Kethril said, though uncertainty flickered in his cold eyes. "Even humans aren't reckless enough to destroy a civilian station." Maya's smile widened. "You still don't understand us at all. That's why you lost the war. And that's why you'll keep losing until there are no humans left to fight." She triggered the first sequence of charges. The explosions rippled through the station's superstructure with mathematical precision. Each blast calculated to disrupt specific systems without causing catastrophic hull breaches. Emergency lighting bathed the docking bay in red as the station's main power grid failed. Gravity generators fluctuated, causing everyone except Maya to struggle for balance. Her magnetic boots kept her anchored while her enemies flailed helplessly. Maya moved in the moment of confusion, diving behind a cargo container as energy bolts filled the air where she had been standing. Her armor's tactical display showed her everything she needed to know. 17 hostiles in the immediate area, backup arriving in 3 minutes, and structural integrity dropping by 2% per minute. "All units, converge on docking bay 94. Kethril shouted into his communicator. "The terrorist has explosives." Maya triggered the second sequence, and the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, but those seconds were all Maya needed. In the darkness, she moved with the silent efficiency that had made her legendary. The first Zephyrian soldier went down to a precise nerve strike that paralyzed him without permanent damage. The second fell to a chokehold that cut off blood flow to his brain. Maya had always preferred to disable rather than kill when possible. Even during the worst days of the war, Kethril was shouting orders to soldiers who could no longer see their target. Maya's armor gave her every advantage in low-light conditions, while the aliens were effectively blind. She methodically worked her way through the enemy positions, eliminating threats and gathering intelligence from their equipment. "Where is she?" one soldier called out in panic. "Thermal sensors show nothing," another replied. "How can a human hide from our equipment?" Maya almost laughed. They assumed human technology was primitive because humanity had lost the war. They didn't realize that losing had forced humans to become more creative, more adaptive, more dangerous. Her armor incorporated technologies scavenged from a dozen different species, combined in ways that no single alien race would have thought possible. She reached her ship just as the station's emergency systems restored partial lighting. The vessel was a modified cargo hauler, looking like a piece of junk from the outside, but packed with hidden upgrades. Maya had learned the value of being underestimated during her time in hiding. Kethril spotted her as she reached the ship's boarding ramp. Stop her! He screamed, raising his weapon. The Empire's glory demands her capture? Maya turned to face him one last time. Ambassador, may I give you some advice? You are in no position to negotiate. I'm not negotiating. I'm educating. Maya held up the data storage device containing everything she had stolen from the station's computers. In approximately 10 minutes, this information will be transmitted to every news network in the galaxy. The universe is going to learn about Dr. Kess's experiments, about your Empire's genocide plans, and about every corrupt official who made this station possible. Kethral's face went pale. You cannot prove Imperial involvement. I don't need to prove it. I just need to plant doubt. How long do you think the other species will trust the Zephyrian Empire once they realize you're conducting illegal genetic experiments? How many trade agreements will survive the scandal? How many allies will reconsider their treaties? Maya triggered the final sequence of charges, and the station's communication array erupted in a shower of sparks. But she had already transmitted everything she needed to send. Backup communication relays throughout the sector were already bouncing her data to human resistance cells. Who would ensure it reached the proper destinations? The beauty of information warfare, Maya continued as she backed up the boarding ramp, is that you can't shoot the truth once it's already been told. She disappeared into her ship just as Zephyrian reinforcements flooded into the docking bay. The cargo hauler's engines roared to life with the distinctive sound of military-grade propulsion. Another surprise for enemies who expected to face a broken refugee. Raven Leader, this is Ghost Actual. Package secured, beginning extraction. Copy that. We've got company incoming. Looks like the Zephyrians called for backup. Maya's ship burst out of the docking bay and into the void, immediately engaging its stealth systems. The modified engines could outrun most military vessels, and the sensor baffles made tracking nearly impossible. But Maya wasn't running from the fight. She was preparing for the next phase of the operation. Raven Leader, transmit the following message on all frequencies to the personnel of Zephyr Station and any Zephyrian forces in this system. You have 30 minutes to evacuate all civilians and prisoners. From the research facility in Section C7, any being found harming test subjects will be considered an enemy combatant. This is your only warning. Ghost, are you planning what I think you're planning? Maya checked her ship's weapon systems. The cargo hauler mounted enough firepower to level a small city, all of it hidden beneath fake hull plating. I'm planning to remind the galaxy that humans keep their promises. Both the good ones and the bad ones. On the station, chaos was spreading as the information Maya had stolen began circulating through underground networks. Security footage of the illegal experiments appeared on black market data feeds. Financial records showing the Empire's involvement leaked to investigative journalists. Communication logs proving corruption at the highest levels of station management spread like wildfire through social media. Dr. Kess watched his carefully hidden operation crumble in real time as his own security forces began questioning orders. Some of the guards had family members who were human refugees. Others belonged to species that had been targeted by Imperial expansion. When faced with evidence of what they were protecting, many chose to walk away rather than continue serving. Doctor, we're detecting incoming ships, his assistant reported. Fear evident in his cybernetically enhanced voice. Multiple human vessels approaching at high speed. Dr. Kess stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Impossible. The human fleet was destroyed years ago. Apparently, the reports of humanity's death were greatly exaggerated, the assistant replied. The lead vessel is transmitting surrender demands. They want all test subjects released immediately. Through the facility's viewports, Dr. Kess could see the approaching ships. They were clearly of alien manufacture, but they moved with the coordinated precision that had made human fleet tactics legendary. Somehow, impossibly, humanity had rebuilt its military capability using captured enemy technology. Maya's voice echoed through the facility's communication system. Calm and professional despite the circumstances. Dr. Viridian Kess, this is Admiral Maya Chun of the Human Liberation Fleet. You are surrounded and outgunned. Release your prisoners immediately, and we may allow you to face trial instead of summary execution. Dr. Kess activated his personal communicator. Admiral, surely we can reach some arrangement. My research could benefit all species. Your research involves torturing sentient beings against their will. There is no arrangement possible with monsters. You cannot judge the actions of a superior species by your primitive human standards. Maya's laugh was cold as vacuum. Doctor, we've been judging you by human standards for 2 years. That's how long we've been planning this moment. Did you really think we wouldn't find out about your little operation? The first human fighters screamed past the facility's viewports, their weapons powered but not yet firing. It was a show of force, a demonstration that Maya could destroy the entire facility whenever she chose. But she was giving the prisoners a chance at rescue instead. You have 20 minutes to begin evacuation procedures, Maya continued. After that, anyone still inside the facility will be considered hostile. Human standards of justice may be primitive, Doctor, but they are also final. The evacuation of Dr. Kess's facility began within minutes of Maya's ultimatum. The doctor had spent years believing himself untouchable, protected by imperial backing and the assumption that no one would dare challenge the station's neutrality. Now he watched his life's work crumble as his own. Staff turned against him. Maya coordinated the rescue operation from her command ship. The modified cargo hauler revealing its true nature as a mobile command center. The vessel's cargo holds open to disgorge squadrons of rescue craft, each one crewed by humans who had personal reasons for being there. Many were former prisoners themselves, survivors of similar facilities who had joined the resistance rather than accept the role of victims. Rescue Team Alpha, this is Ghost Actual. You are cleared for entry through Airlock 7. Expect heavy security in sections C through F. Copy that, Admiral. We've got medical teams standing by for trauma cases. Maya monitored multiple data streams as her forces swept through the facility. The human team leaders moved with surgical precision, having studied the facility's layout from the intelligence she had gathered. They knew exactly where to find the prisoners, how to disable the security systems, and which personnel might resist. Dr. Kess made one final desperate attempt to save his research. Security teams, defend the laboratory at all costs. Destroy the data cores if necessary. But his security forces were no longer following orders. The leaked information had shown them exactly what they had been protecting, and many found they couldn't stomach the truth. When faced with evidence of systematic torture and genetic experimentation, even hardened mercenaries began to question their loyalties. Doctor, this is Security Chief Vorthek, came a gravelly voice over the intercom. My teams are standing down. Whatever you are paying us isn't worth protecting this madness. You cannot abandon your contracts. The Empire can find new mercenaries. I'm not dying to protect a monster. Maya watched the facility's defenses collapse as security teams either fled or actively assisted the rescue operation. It was a phenomenon she had seen before during the war, when faced with clear evidence of moral failure. Most beings chose to do the right thing regardless of their species or previous loyalties. The first rescued prisoners began arriving at the human ships within the hour. Maya personally oversaw their medical treatment, her expression growing darker with each survivor's testimony. The experiments had been far worse than even she had imagined. Dr. Kess hadn't just been studying alien physiology. He had been trying to create a new form of mental conditioning that would make entire species docile and compliant. Admiral, reported Dr. Sarah Martinez, the fleet's chief medical officer and one of Maya's oldest friends. We've rescued 47 prisoners so far, representing 12 different species. The physical damage is extensive, but the psychological trauma is going to take years to heal. Maya nodded grimly. What about the research data? We've captured everything. Computer cores, biological samples, even Dr. Kess's personal notes. This is enough evidence to bring down everyone involved, from the lowest guard to the highest imperial officials. Good, make sure copies are sent to every major news network and government in the galaxy. Let them all know what the Zephyrian Empire really stands for. On the station, Ambassador Kethril watched his carefully planned capture operation disintegrate into a public relations disaster. The human resistance had turned his moment of triumph into proof of imperial brutality. Worse, they had done it with surgical precision, minimizing civilian casualties while maximizing political damage. Ambassador, his aide reported with barely concealed panic, the Galactic Council is demanding an immediate investigation. The Valkyrie Confederation has withdrawn their trade agreement. The Astery Collective is recalling their ambassador. Kethril stared out at the human fleet that surrounded the station. Somehow, impossibly, the species his empire had declared extinct had rebuilt itself into a force capable of challenging imperial authority. How many ships? Current count is 37 vessels of various classes. But Admiral, they're using our own technology against us. Modified Zephyrian fighters, captured Imperial cruisers, even what appears to be a dreadnought built from salvaged components. A dreadnought? Impossible. Humans lack the industrial capacity to, Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Chun. Kethril accepted the communication with trembling hands. Maya's face appeared on his screen, composed and professional despite the circumstances. Behind her, he could see the bridge of a vessel that looked disturbingly familiar. Ambassador Kethril, Maya said politely, I wanted to thank you for leading us to Dr. Kess's facility. We've been hunting him for months. This is an act of war. The Empire will not tolerate. The Empire is in no position to make threats, Maya interrupted. You've lost this system, and every species in the galaxy now knows about your illegal experimentation program. How many allies do you think will stand with you after this? Kethril's face flushed with rage. You may have won this battle, but humanity remains broken. A few stolen ships cannot... A few stolen ships? Maya smiled. Ambassador, you're looking at the bridge of the ZES Domination, former flagship of the 3rd Imperial Fleet, the ship you reported as destroyed at the Battle of Kepler Station. Would you like to know how we acquired it? Kethril's blood turned to ice. The Domination had been the pride of the Imperial Fleet, a dreadnought-class vessel capable of laying waste to entire star systems. Its loss had been attributed to a reactor malfunction, not enemy action. The reactor malfunction was our doing, Maya continued, as if reading his thoughts. We infiltrated your flagship, disabled its defenses, and captured it with the crew still alive. They're working for us now, voluntarily. Turns out many Zephyrians aren't comfortable with genocide once they understand what they're really fighting for. The camera pulled back to show the bridge, and Kethril gasped in recognition. The crew positions were filled with a mix of humans and aliens working together, including several Zephyrian officers he knew by name. Former Imperial personnel who had chosen to join the human resistance rather than continue serving an empire they could no longer respect. This is impossible, Kethril whispered. Ambassador, here's something you never understood about humans. We don't just fight to win. We fight to prove that there's a better way to live. When your own people see that, some of them choose to join us instead of fighting us. Maya gestured to her mixed crew. Every being on this bridge chose to be here. They weren't conquered or coerced. They saw what the Empire really represents and decided they wanted no part of it. That's why you'll never defeat us, no matter how many ships you build or how many worlds you conquer. The Empire's glory is eternal. Kethril protested. The Empire's glory is built on fear and oppression. But fear only works as long as people believe they have no choice. We're here to show them that there's always a choice. Maya leaned back in her captain's chair, the very picture of calm authority. Here's what's going to happen, Ambassador. You're going to return to your empire and deliver a message for me. Tell them that humanity is no longer hiding. We're done being victims, done being refugees, done being afraid. From now on, we're offering sanctuary to anyone who wants to escape the Empire's version of order. You cannot protect everyone. We don't need to protect everyone. We just need to prove that protection is possible. Once people see that freedom is achievable, they'll fight for it themselves. That's how empires really fall, Ambassador. Not from outside force, but from the simple realization that they're no longer necessary. The transmission ended, leaving Kethril staring at a blank screen. Around him, his staff exchanged worried glances. In the space of a few hours, their carefully planned operation had turned into a strategic disaster that would echo throughout the galaxy. Maya turned to her mixed crew of humans and aliens. All stations, prepare for departure. We have more facilities to liberate and more people to free. As the human fleet began to disperse, each ship carrying its cargo of freed prisoners and liberated information, Maya allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They were no longer hiding among the galaxy's forgotten masses. For the first time since the war's end, humanity was standing in the light again, and the universe would never be the same. 3 months after the liberation of Zephyr Station, Maya stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council in their grand chamber on Nexus Prime. The massive hall was designed to intimidate, with soaring architecture that dwarfed individual beings and reminded them of their insignificance in the face of galactic civilization. Maya felt no intimidation. She had seen too much of the galaxy's dark corners to be impressed by its official grandeur. "Admiral Chun," announced Counselor Vexstar of the Astery Collective, his scaled features carefully neutral. "You stand accused of acts of piracy, terrorism, and violation of sovereign space. How do you answer these charges?" Maya looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Dozens of species were represented here, from the insectoid Kithra to the gaseous nebular consciousness. Some watched her with curiosity, others with fear, and a few with barely concealed admiration. The galaxy had been talking about nothing but the human resistance for months. "I answer that your charges are meaningless," Maya replied calmly. This council sat silent while an entire species faced extinction. You watched as civilians were rounded up and subjected to illegal experimentation. You allowed the Zephyrian Empire to commit genocide while hiding behind words like sovereignty and non-interference. Your moral authority died the moment you chose politics over justice. Angry murmurs rippled through the chamber. Councillor Kethmore of the Valkyrie Confederation leaned forward in his crystalline chair. "You speak of justice, yet your forces have attacked civilian installations and stolen military vessels belonging to sovereign nations. I've liberated prisoners and rescued victims. The fact that you see those actions as criminal says more about this council than it does about humanity." Maya activated a holographic projector built into her armor. The air above the chamber's central podium filled with images that made several representatives turn away in disgust. Rescued prisoners bore the scars of genetic experimentation. Children who had been subjected to neural conditioning struggled to remember their own names. Entire families who had disappeared into Imperial research facilities. "These are the civilians you're so concerned about protecting," Maya continued. "Every being you see here was rescued from facilities that operated under Imperial protection. Some of these experiments were funded by members of this very council." The Zephyrian representative, Ambassador Thelvin, rose to his feet with imperial dignity. "The Empire categorically denies any involvement in unauthorized research. These allegations are propaganda designed to—" "Counselor Thelvin?" Maya interrupted. "Would you like me to play the audio recordings of your personal communications with Dr. Kess? Or perhaps the financial records showing Imperial payments to his operation? I have 17 different pieces of evidence linking your government directly to these atrocities." Thelvin's pale blue skin flushed darker with anger and embarrassment. "Such evidence could easily be fabricated." "Then call for an independent investigation. I'll provide everything to neutral forensic experts for verification." The chamber fell silent. Maya knew they wouldn't call for an investigation because too many council members had profited from the system she was exposing. The galaxy's official government was built on the same foundation of exploitation and selective blindness that had made places like Zephyr Station possible. Counselor Vexstar cleared his throat diplomatically. "Admiral Chun, while your passion for justice is understandable, you must realize that galactic stability requires certain compromises. Not every injustice can be addressed through military action." Maya laughed, the sound echoing through the vast chamber. "Counselor, That's exactly the kind of thinking that allowed the Holocaust to happen on ancient Earth, good people doing nothing while evil flourishes, calling it political necessity or maintaining stability. The situation is more complex than the situation is exactly as simple as I'm making it, Maya cut him off. There are people who hurt others for power and profit, and there are people who stop them. Everything else is just excuse-making. She gestured to her honor guard, a mixed unit of humans and aliens who had volunteered to protect her during this diplomatic mission. Every being standing with me chose to be here. They weren't conquered or coerced. They saw what the Empire represents and decided they wanted to fight for something better. Among her guards stood Commander Zethric, a former Zephyrian naval officer who had defected after witnessing Imperial atrocities. Captain Villana, a Velkari trader whose family had been killed in an Imperial raid, now flew missions for the human resistance. Dr. Teth, an Astery scientist who had refused to develop bioweapons, found sanctuary among humans who valued his conscience more than his research capabilities. The human resistance has grown beyond anything you can imagine, Maya continued. We have cells on over 100 worlds now, and our fleet numbers in the thousands. But more importantly, we've proven that the galaxy doesn't have to accept tyranny as the price of peace. Counselor Kethmer's crystalline features reflected the chamber's lights as he spoke. Admiral, surely you understand that your actions are destabilizing established governments. If every species begins taking military action based on their personal interpretation of justice, then maybe those governments deserve to be destabilized, Maya replied. Counselor, the Velkari Confederation has the second largest slave trade in the galaxy. The Astery Collective uses forced labor in their mining operations. The Zephyrian Empire practices systematic genocide. Tell me, what exactly am I destabilizing that's worth preserving? The chamber erupted in protests and denials, but Maya continued speaking, her voice cutting through the noise with military precision. The truth is that this council exists to maintain the status quo regardless of how many beings suffer under that system. You call it stability. I call it cowardice. You cannot simply declare war on galactic civilization. Thelvin shouted. I'm not declaring war on civilization. I'm declaring war on barbarism disguised as civilization. Maya turned to address the entire chamber, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. Every species represented here had to fight for their freedom at some point in their history. Humans are no different. We're just fighting smarter than our enemies expect. She activated another hologram, this one showing star maps marked with resistance activities. In the past 3 months, we've liberated 47 research facilities, rescued over 3,000 prisoners, and exposed corruption networks spanning dozens of systems. We've done this with minimal civilian casualties and maximum political impact. Through terrorism and piracy, Thelvin insisted. Through asymmetric warfare and information operations, Maya corrected. We hit military targets, rescue prisoners, and expose the truth. The fact that the truth is politically inconvenient doesn't make telling it terrorism. Counselor Vexstar tried to regain control of the session. Admiral Chun, what would you have us do? The galaxy requires governance, and governance requires compromise. I would have you govern with justice instead of convenience. I would have you protect the weak instead of enabling the strong. I would have you remember that every being in the galaxy has the right to live free from oppression. Maya stepped closer to the council podium, her presence commanding attention despite her relatively small human stature. But I know you won't do any of those things. This council exists to maintain the power structure that benefits its members, nothing more. So here's what's going to happen instead. She activated a final hologram, this one showing dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. The human resistance is establishing sanctuary systems where any being can find protection from tyranny. We're building a parallel civilization based on the principles this council claims to uphold but refuses to enforce. You cannot establish independent governments without council authorization. Kethmer protested. Watch us, Maya replied simply. We're not asking for your permission. We're informing you of our intentions as a courtesy. Thelvin's voice rose with imperial outrage. The Empire will not tolerate the establishment of rebel enclaves within our sphere of influence. Maya turned to face the Zephyrian ambassador directly. Ambassador, your empire has been trying to destroy humanity for 5 years. We're still here. Your fleets have been hunting us for 2 years since the official end of the war. We've only grown stronger. What makes you think you can stop us now? Because this time you won't be hiding among refugees and criminals. You'll be establishing fixed positions that can be targeted and eliminated. Maya smiled, the expression cold enough to lower the chamber's temperature. Ambassador, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that I stood here in front of the entire galaxy and told you exactly what we're going to do. I want you to remember it when your fleets arrive at systems we've supposedly claimed, only to find empty space. I want you to remember it when your intelligence services realize they've been chasing shadows while we've been building something you can't comprehend. She turned back to address the full council. The Age of Empires is ending. The Age of Choice is beginning. Every being in the galaxy now knows that freedom is possible, that tyranny can be resisted, that there are people willing to fight for justice. That knowledge is spreading faster than your fleets can travel. Maya gestured to her mixed honor guard one final time. This is what the future looks like. Beings of different species working together by choice, not conquest. Building something better instead of just maintaining something profitable. She headed for the chamber's exit, her guards forming a protective formation around her. At the doorway, she turned back one last time. The human resistance thanks the Council for this opportunity to address the galaxy. The next time we meet, it will be as representatives of the Free Worlds Alliance. Until then, remember, every choice you make either supports freedom or enables tyranny. Choose wisely. As Maya left the chamber, the assembled representatives sat in stunned silence. They had expected to intimidate a desperate terrorist leader. Instead, they had witnessed the diplomatic debut of a new galactic power that played by completely different rules. 1 year later, Maya stood on the observation deck of Liberation Station, watching as another refugee transport docked with their newest sanctuary. The space station had been built from salvaged Imperial vessels, captured pirate ships, and donated materials from species who had grown tired of the galaxy's endless cycles of oppression. It orbited a planet that officially didn't exist, hidden in a nebula that played tricks with sensors and protected by defensive systems that made attacking it a nightmare. The transport carried beings from 17 different species, all of them seeking the freedom that the Free Worlds Alliance had promised. Valkyrie slaves fleeing their crystal masters, Astery workers escaping forced labor camps, Zephyrian dissidents who had been marked for execution, even humans, survivors of the scattered diaspora who had finally found a way home. Admiral, reported Commander Sarah Kim, Maya's former squadron leader who now served as her chief of staff. The transport reports 237 refugees, including 43 children. Medical teams are standing by. Maya nodded, watching the docking procedures with satisfaction. Liberation Station was the 7th sanctuary they had established, and it was already operating at capacity. The galaxy was full of beings who wanted something better than what their governments offered, and the Alliance provided it without asking for anything in return except a commitment to the same principles of freedom and choice. Any word from the diplomatic mission to the Kithara hives? Ambassador Keth reports significant progress. The Hive Queens are interested in our proposal for mutual defense agreements. Apparently they're tired of Imperial expansion into their space. Maya smiled. The insectoid Kithara were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, with technology that made even the Zephyrians nervous. If they joined the Alliance, it would shift the balance of power in ways that would terrify the established governments. Admiral, came another voice. And Maya turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez approaching with a datapad in hand. Elena had been one of the first civilians to join the resistance, a xenobiologist who had lost her family in an Imperial raid. I have the quarterly report on our integration programs. Maya accepted the pad and scrolled through the data. The numbers were staggering. Over 50,000 beings now lived in Alliance space, representing 43 different species. They had established colonies on 12 worlds, built 15 space stations, and maintained a fleet that rivaled most government navies. All of it had been accomplished in less than 3 years, using nothing but determination and the willingness to treat every being with dignity. Crime rates are down 8% from last quarter, Elena continued. Productivity is up 12%. Most importantly, psychological evaluation scores show significant improvement among refugees who have been with us for more than 6 months. What about the children? That's the best news of all. Children who were rescued from imperial facilities are showing remarkable recovery rates. Give them safety, education, and the freedom to choose their own futures, and they bounce back faster than we ever expected. Maya felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the station's life support systems. This was what they had been fighting for, proof that the galaxy could be better than what it had always been. Every successful integration, every child who learned to laugh again, every being who discovered their own potential was a victory worth more than any military triumph. Admiral Chun to the command center, came an urgent voice over the intercom. Priority Alpha communication from the Galactic Council? Maya made her way to the command center, where her senior staff had already assembled. The main holographic display showed the familiar chamber where she had made her declaration a year ago, but now it looked different. Many of the seats were empty, and the representatives who remained seemed nervous and uncertain. Counselor Vextar appeared on the screen, his scaled features showing exhaustion and worry. Admiral Chun, I am authorized to speak for the Galactic Council in this matter. Counselor, Maya replied formally. What can the Alliance do for you? That is, the Council wishes to discuss the possibility of formal diplomatic relations. Maya managed to keep her expression neutral, but she could see her staff exchanging glances of amazement. The same body that had called her a terrorist a year ago was now seeking diplomatic recognition. That's an interesting development, Counselor. What changed the Council's position? Vextar's discomfort was obvious even across interstellar distances. Recent events have made it clear that the Alliance represents a significant political force in the galaxy. The Council believes that dialogue is preferable to continued misunderstandings. Maya almost laughed. Misunderstandings was a diplomatic way of saying that 3 more member governments had collapsed in the past year, their populations joining alliance worlds or establishing their own independent colonies. The Galactic Council's authority was evaporating as beings across the galaxy realized they had alternatives to imperial rule. I appreciate the Council's willingness to talk, Maya said carefully. But formal recognition would require the Alliance to accept certain restrictions on our operations. Our fundamental mission is to provide sanctuary for anyone seeking freedom from oppression. We won't compromise that principle for political convenience. The Alliance's humanitarian efforts are commendable, Vextar replied, though the words clearly caused him pain. The Council is prepared to discuss reasonable accommodations. Maya activated a side channel to her senior staff. Opinions? Commander Kim spoke first. It's a trap. They're losing control and want to find a way to legitimize their authority by making us part of their system. Dr. Vasquez disagreed. Maybe, but formal recognition would make it easier to help refugees. Right now, we have to operate in legal gray areas. Commander Zethric, the former Zephyrian officer, offered his perspective. Admiral, the Empire is fracturing. 3 sectors have declared independence in the past month. They need legitimacy more than we do. Maya considered their advice while studying Vextar's image. The Asteri Counselor had always been one of the more reasonable voices in the galactic government. But he was still part of a system that had enabled decades of oppression. Counselor, she finally said. The Alliance is willing to discuss formal relations, but only on the basis of equality. We won't accept client status or protectorate agreements. If the Council wants to treat us as a legitimate government, then you need to actually treat us as equals. The Council is prepared to consider unprecedented arrangements. Good, then here are our terms for opening negotiations. First, Immediate cessation of all military actions against Alliance vessels and territories. Second, guarantee of safe passage for refugee transports seeking Alliance sanctuary. Third, establishment of neutral zones where beings can choose freely between government rule and Alliance membership. Vextar's expression showed how radical these demands were. Admiral, you're asking the Council to essentially validate the right of any being to reject their birth government. I'm asking the Council to recognize the right of self-determination. Every species represented in that chamber fought for their own freedom at some point. We're just extending that same opportunity to individuals instead of limiting it to entire species. The transmission paused while Vextar consulted with other council members off-screen. When he returned, his expression was resigned. The Council will consider these terms. But Admiral, you must understand that what you're proposing would fundamentally alter the nature of galactic governance. Maya smiled. Counselor, that's exactly what we're proposing. The current system is built on the assumption that beings exist to serve their governments. We believe governments should exist to serve their people. And if they refuse to serve, then people should be free to choose something better. After the transmission ended, Maya returned to the observation deck where the refugee transport had finished docking. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see families walking through the station's corridors, children playing in spaces designed specifically for their different physiologies, beings from species that had been enemies for millennia working together on common projects. Commander, Kim joined her at the window. Think they'll accept our terms? Some will, eventually. The smart ones will realize that we're offering them a way to remain relevant in a changing galaxy. The others will be replaced by their own people when the suffering becomes unbearable. And if they